What's going on? Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show on DRFTV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forum's Twitter handle at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forum's Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. This is the preview edition. We're going to take a look ahead at the Grade 1 Los Alamitos Futurity, a little bit of video analysis. We'll also give you the NFL Week 13 Trifecta, 25, 14, and 0 year to date. Hoping to keep the engine cooking and just keep rolling along as we get closer and closer to the NFL postseason. If you listen to this in podcast form like most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. If you're over on YouTube, click that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. You get all the latest from DRFTV. If you're over on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever you take your podcasts, write us a review, give us a positive rating. It's always greatly appreciated. A couple of Grade 1 races from Los Al for 2-year-olds coming up on Saturday afternoon. You've got the Grade 1 Starlet as well as the Los Alamitos Futurity. The Los Al Futurity is the one that I will be diving into here momentarily. Baffert has the big two in here. The two morning line favorites, we'll find out how they shake out. Improbable looks like he's going to be tough in there, but still an interesting race to break down, take a look at some tape, especially considering these are soon to be 3-year-olds and possibly horses on their way to the Kentucky Derby, or the trail to the Triple Crown anyway. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Let's take a look at the field for the Grade 1 Los Alamitos Futurity. All right, so we're going to take a look at the second, or I should say the first of the two Grade 1 races on Saturday at Los Al, the one for the boys, the 2-year-old boys, the Los Al Futurity. Mile and a 16th. They only have a main track there, so obviously that's what we're dealing with, the main track. It's a relatively short field. Both of the Grade 1s are short fields on Saturday, but you've got quality in each of them. I wonder why, because Bob Baffert is well represented in both races, and I'm not going to argue with anyone that looks at any of these and just says, why bother trying to beat Baffert? It's well documented what his numbers have been with the 2-year-olds as a whole, specifically the 2-year-old first-time starters. Luckily, you're not dealing with that in this spot. The difference is you're dealing with legitimately good horses, and there's a scenario where you could be looking at some Kentucky Derby contenders coming out of this race. Let's kick things off right down on the inside with number 1, Improbable. Now, you can see he's really done nothing wrong. He's 2 for 2 overall. He's earned Beyer speed figures of 85 and 93 in his 2 lifetime starts. You know Baffert usually thinks they're pretty good when he's willing to ship them in their second lifetime start, sends them into Stakes Company, but especially sends them to Churchill Downs, where, again, the Derby is going to be the first Saturday in May. Improbable did so. They sent him out there in the street sense. He got the job done, drawing away by over 7 lengths. You can see Trophy Chaser ran second. He was a length and a quarter clear of the third-place finisher, who came back and earned a 69 Beyer in his next start. You can see my little notes here in Formulator, and I would encourage all of you to use Formulator and go through and do the same. I thought he was impressive the way that he finished. I thought it was nice, especially considering I thought in the debut he just kind of grinded away and was more workmanlike. The thing that I've noted about both of his 2 lifetime starts, and we'll take a look at the tape here momentarily, you can see I have written in here early on, going down the backside, that he was climbing a bit in the career debut. And then even here in the street sense, I have written in he was in a bit tight and climbing a little bit. Now we're going to go through. This is the street sense. We'll blow this up. And you're going to note, you're going to take a look for the Windstar Silks, the number 2 horse. He's a little bit sluggish out of the gate. I'm going to try and keep my cursor on him as well as possible. You're going to see eventually he's in a little bit of a tight spot here, and Drayden Van Dyke's going to want to get him out into the clear. The problem is, take a look at his overall motion when he gets in behind horses, and I'm going to assume it's just the kickback. He's not the smoothest mover until he finally does get into the clear. You see him right now at that chute. He's just sort of climbing. He's changing leads a little bit. You can chalk that up to a couple things. Perhaps it is the fact that he doesn't love the kickback. Perhaps it's the fact that he's just a baby and he's figuring things out. Now you see he's running up on heels in a little bit of a tight spot. He's learning a lot in a race like this, so I don't want to make it out that this is a problem, but I do find it interesting that he did this in this spot in his second lifetime start, and now you see he's going to be out in the perfect position beneath Van Dyke. But I find that fascinating that he did that in this race as well as his career debut. Now, we're going back to this one again. We've already broken from the gate. He's here in the number 2 in those white silks. And you're going to see here pretty quick when the 5 comes over on him, watch his gait. He changes. He just gets a little bit on the climby side, and it's not the smoothest move in the world until Van Dyke gets him out into the clear. Then he kind of settles down a little bit. So there's a part of me that does wonder if this is a horse that doesn't necessarily love kickback, or he's really just kind of a big baby and he's figuring some things out. It's really undeniable, though, once he does get that engine cooking, that there is something there. There's no question about that. Now, the reason I bring all that up about the kickback and potentially maybe he doesn't love that or whatever it may be, breaking from the inside post. It's not as though he's a slow horse. He hasn't gotten out of the gate brilliantly in either of his 2 lifetime starts. but he does have some legitimate speed drawn just at the outside in the number 2 Savagery. Now, Savagery comes out of the Bob Hope from Del Mar most recently, where he ran into Mucho Gusto as well as Extra Hope. We'll touch on each of them momentarily. Why I think this relates to a horse like Improbable is if Savagery goes out and clears and Improbable sits the pocket trip, in theory, that's a great situation. But now going 2 turns for the first time, is he going to appreciate it, or is he going to get a little bit more relaxed now that he's experienced kickback a few times? These are things that we won't know until the race actually begins, and who knows? Maybe Van Dyke's going to be on a send mission to ensure that that doesn't happen. It'll be just interesting to see how everything shakes down. I think he's strictly the horse to beat. He's very clearly the horse in the Baffert barn that everyone seems to be most excited about. We'll see what we get from him. I think he should be a short price. I haven't done this in the past when I've done these past 2 weeks anyway, or the past 2 sort of video analysis. These are the value lines that I would give them accordingly. I think Improbable, I wouldn't touch him anything less than 6 to 5. I expect him to be considerably shorter than that. Therefore, he is not worth a win wager, in my opinion. Now, Savagery and the folks coming out of the Bob Hope. We're going to go back to the Bob Hope. That is this race right over here at Del Mar. We're already picking it up on the far turn, just for sort of players' sake. Down on the inside here, you have Mucho Gusto for Baffert. He's been setting the pace throughout. Just to the outside in the Rockingham Silks, you've got Savagery, and down here in the JMS Silks, you have Extra Hope. Now, we're going to fire up the tape, and you're going to see in between horses, there's a horse on the outside here called Sparkyville. He takes a good run at the top 2. At this point, I wouldn't hold it against Savagery if he totally backed out of it, but the fact that he fights on as gamely as he does, I think that's a positive. On the flip side here, you see how confidently Joe Talamo's riding Mucho Gusto. There's a part of me that at this point looks like, oh boy, he might be in some deep water, but he keeps fighting on gamely. It's a good effort from him. And also, on this horse outside, I think Extra Hope runs a giant race, considering, we'll go through and take a look at the PPs momentarily, the way this race was run, essentially, it was a merry-go-round. No one really made up any sort of ground at any point. You can see I have written here in Formulator, you can go through with card notes, trip notes, or horse notes. But when you go into the trip notes, there is a section for a note about the race itself. I'll always put that in when there's something like this, where it was a merry-go-round. There was really no passing that went on at any point in this race. Savagery essentially held his position throughout. You're going to see here in my final little note, I don't like him going longer because I thought he was getting a little bit just sort of up and down, going through the motions at the end of this. Blinkers come off in the first time, stretching out to 2 turns on the main track for a horse like Savagery. Now, you go to the outside 2 horses, Extra Hope and Mucho Gusto. Extra Hope, I think he's going to appreciate going back out to 2 turns. Now, again, I'm not going to hold this race against him to Bob Hope because I don't think there was a heck of a lot of passing going on. Then he was moving pretty well in the grand scheme of things. I just think he had some things work against him there. You're going to see here, I thought it was a nice effort, and I think he wants more ground. But that goes back to this race, which we spoke about, because I believe the Bob Hope was the first time I did something like this. And we showed the tape with this race here, the maiden special weight score, where he won by the length of the stretch. I thought he was very impressive that day. It was his first time in blinkers, and that was his first time getting out to 2 turns with those blinkers. The slight turn back in distance I thought would be beneficial. I liked him that day, and I thought he ran quite well. I think he's interesting in a spot like this, getting back to 2 turns. We'll find out ultimately how he handles it. As far as Mucho Gusto is concerned, you see he has a buyer speed figure that's fast enough. As far as what I'm concerned, this is just something, an exercise that I do. I'm going to scroll back up to the top. My PP is over here. I'll write in a number that I think from a buyer standpoint it will be required, or I at least want horses that have run that fast, hopefully projecting forward that, okay, if you've run that fast, it's going to take at least that number to get the job done here. And this is the raw time form US rating. You can see a horse like Improbable. Both times he has eclipsed the 85, or at least equaled it, and both times he has either equaled or eclipsed the raw time form number. When you go down to other horses, a horse like, let's just use Extra Hope as the example, he's yet to eclipse it from a buyer standpoint, but each of his past 2, he has equaled or eclipsed it from a time form US standpoint, and the same goes for Mucho Gusto in the career debut. A little bit light on both figs, but he took that necessary step forward here from a buyer and from a time form standpoint. The other thing that you can't overlook with a horse like Mucho Gusto, not only is there a scenario where he could potentially be controlling speed, although I do wonder with this outside draw beneath Talamo, if a horse like Savagery is intent on going, or even if the instruction to Drayden Van Dyke down on Improbable is send and make sure you get out of there. With this outside draw, I wonder if Mucho Gusto and company are content finding out. I know it's a grade 1 and you want to go on and win it, but this is a good opportunity to find out if he can sit successfully off of a target and be able to go on and get the job done. The piece that I was going to mention that you can't overlook with Mucho Gusto, this piece right here, I hope you can see that I've highlighted it. He's 1-for-1 at Los Alamitos. This is not the friendliest racetrack for certain horses. Some take to it, some don't. I think Mucho Gusto, again, he's an interesting alternative. Again, Baffert with his 2-year-olds, they just continue to fire each and every one of them. If you don't totally love Improbable, you're probably going to get twice the price on Mucho Gusto. Speaking of prices, here's a little formulator fact for you that I wrote down. Hopefully it shows up with the yellow highlight. In the past 5 years with 2-year-olds in graded stakes races at Los Alamitos, Baffert's horses are 5 for 13, 9 times in the money, the 113 ROI. The reason that the ROI is as small as it is with a pretty solid win percentage, these are your winners. Odds of 1-2, 3-5, 2-5, 3-5, and 1-5. Conversely, horses that are above odds on, 0 for 7. You're likely to have above odds on for Mucho Gusto. You are going to have odds on in all likelihood for Improbable. Do with that what you will. So we spoke about those races. Now, one other horse that I want to touch on that I do think is a little bit intriguing, that's Dueling. Dueling is a horse, when he broke his maiden, I thought he was quite impressive. You see, I've written in here, and I've told you in the past, and I'll continue to do it as long as I do these sort of video previews. Whenever I capitalize things in a trip note, it's because I just want to be able to quickly have my eye catch it rather than have to go through and necessarily see, okay, 1-2 path, 4 path, whatever it may be. Sure, you can go through and look at that if you'd like. But whenever I see these sort of things, that immediately draws my attention, makes me say, okay, well, these are things that I thought were noteworthy. I thought he ran very well here this day. Now, he was bet down to odds of 3-5. Perhaps it was just a matter of him finding a field that he was considerably better than. I will say in this Breeders' Cup Juvenile, which we'll take a look at momentarily, I thought he was moving very, very impressively rounding the far turn. And I'll show you why I have this written down as my note. Very disappointing, looked primed. For what it's worth, the third place finisher of the Juvenile, Signal Man, he came back and won the Kentucky Jockey Club in his next start with an 84 Beyer speed figure. We're going to pull up the Juvenile now. Now, here we are. We're on the far turn. You're going to look for this red, the number 1, the red silks in the far outside. My cursor is trying to kind of hone in on. That's Dueling. Now, keep in mind, take a look at these fractions, 23-1, 46-4 for the half. He's had a legitimate pace to run at. Timeform US didn't color code it red, meaning it was intensely speed, kind of overly fast. But at the same time, it was, in my opinion, it was honest enough. Now, you're going to see him right now really start to warm up. You can almost pick him up down here in this sort of more zoomed in area. Right now, he's being asked. I thought this was an opportunity for this horse to go on and really threaten and have a chance to hit the board. Now, you're going to see here coming up. See him hanging on his left lead right here. I know it's a little bit blurry. Left lead, still hard to see. Still on his left lead. He's going to emerge back out from this horse in the blue silks. You're going to see he's still on his left lead. Right now, he just changed over. That, to me, he had never done that before. That's a little bit of a concern, and you're going to note that he just flattens out down the lane. There is no sort of added finish with him there. To me, this was an opportunity or an instance where this horse had been moving so well to all of a sudden have that happen, where the lead change is as late as it is. He had really no excuse not to finish better than he did, because it was only an extra 16th of a mile, and he'd already proven himself going 2 turns. I maintain this might be a nice horse. But that lead change piece right here, that concerns me a little bit. And I wish he had finished with a little bit more enthusiasm than he did. Keep in mind, that was also his first start in blinkers. And the blinkers stay on this time around. If for some reason he is just a little bit flat down the lane, I would wonder if they'll eventually make a change here going forward. I think he can still be a nice 3-year-old. But this race is going to look, I'm not betting him clearly. I made him 16-1. I don't think he's one of the likelier win contenders in this race, but I'm going to be very interested to see what we get out of him, because if he runs more similar to this race, and again, from a time form standpoint, he needs to improve greatly. And keep in mind, remember that sort of 20-point differential that I've brought up in the past. Eric Bialik and Peter Thomas Fornatale are the ones that kind of tipped me off to that. If you believe this sort of piece here, the 20-point difference, it fits beautifully between the juvenile Beyer and the juvenile time form rating. But in this maiden special weight race, perhaps the Beyer's a little bit on the inflated side. Maybe this should have been closer to a 78 as opposed to an 82. Point being, if he runs back to this race, I think he has a puncher's chance to get a piece of this thing. I don't think he can win with this race, but I think it would at least give you indication that he could turn into a nice 3-year-old. If you get this race up until the point in the far turn, because he was moving very well. But that far turn coming around and then down the stretch, if he runs like that, he's going to need to improve by leaps and bounds. And if he does that again, I would wonder if occasionally or if at some point the blinkers would come back off. Who knows? We'll find out. I think Dueling could end up being a nice horse when it's all said and done, though. So those are, and I don't want to overlook King of Speed. I have to just acknowledge the fact that I've said it. If I don't think that they have a tremendous chance in a race, I'm not going to go through and do all the deep dive. This is a horse that's predominantly been campaigned on turf. He's run really nothing spectacular outside of the Zuma Beach right here, where you earned an 83 buyer and he won at odds of 5-1. Otherwise, I know he won the Del Mar Juvenile race, but look at the buyer, came back light. Look at the time form rating, came back light. Look, if he won, it would be an absolute stunner. If he runs well and hits the board, I think the Connections would be thrilled. Just to me, I don't think he has a giant chance in this spot. I think they're just trying to find out. And I always am dubious about Jimmy Creed's going too long. So ultimately, we get down to pick time. Improbable's probably going to win. I mean, he is the most likely winner of this race, bar none. I don't really have much interest in betting this race, if I'm being totally honest, because although I have the number 5 horse as my top pick, being Extra Hope, even if I get the 4-1 on him that I require, realistically, I think 4-1 is fair, but it's not necessarily an enticing probability or possibility. If I get 6-1, maybe I'd be inclined to take a small shot, but realistically, I think I'd be more inclined to just sit back and take a look and see how this race shakes down and take notes going forward and see how these horses look facing good horses, going 2 turns, add a little bit of an interesting track. Now, also keep in mind at Los Al, and the last thing I'll say, this stretch run, look where the finish line is as opposed to the top of the lane. Going to have a long time to figure this thing out. We'll find out ultimately how everything shakes down. I think Improbable is the most likely winner. I picked him second. I'm going to pick Extra Hope in here with the hope that 2 turns is really what he wants. When the blinkers went on, 2 starts back, first time 2 turns with the equipment on, he looked like a totally different horse. I'm hopeful that carries over here. And Improbable, he's got to go 2 turns for the first time. Perhaps he doesn't love kickback, unless they're just intent on making the front. We'll find out what we get here. But 5-1 for me in the grade 1, Los Alamitos Futurity. Let's find out if I can pick a winner in a horse race and hopefully pick some winners with the NFL Week 13 Trifecta. NFL Week 13 Trifecta. So far, it's been a good run. Boy, it just feels like just yesterday we were kicking this thing off, and now the weeks are just zipping by. We've only got a few left. To date, 25-14-0, a 2-1 week last weekend. Again, it's all about winning those series. At the end of the day, that's all we're looking to do. It's like a baseball thing. Take 2 out of 3. You're going to continue to improve your position. I think this week's slate of games is actually quite fun, quite interesting. I think you can go a few different ways. One game I didn't pick, but anyone that lives in New England or is a Patriots fan or has any knowledge of the AFC East, the Miami Dolphins are home against the Patriots this week, and the Patriots, and it's been the talk of sports radio up here in Massachusetts, but it's just because it's been like this for years now. It's common knowledge. I think unless you don't pay attention to it, you wouldn't know. The Patriots, when they play in Miami in general, they usually don't play well, but specifically in December. Why? Who the hell knows? But they just don't play well. I think the number, and I think I saw it yesterday on one of the programs up this way, Brady's last 5 games in Miami is 1-4 overall. So this is not a good trip generally for the Patriots going down there. The Dolphins are home and they're catching 8 points. Thought long and hard about that because, again, usually this is just a dogfight and it's just a gross game. But there's something that makes me think that the Patriots are starting to move the direction that they need to be moving. And I wasn't totally convinced. I think they're going to win, but that line, it's going to be close. I could see them winning by 10, but I could also see them winning by a touchdown, 8 points. Just staying away from it. There's one game I really, really like. I've already got my bet in with my friends. There are 2 other games that I think are interesting. Let's start off with one of the interesting games. The Ravens at the Chiefs. The Ravens are catching 7 points on the road. I liked the Ravens last week as a road dog. They went into Atlanta. They got the job done outright. Lamar Jackson, certainly not his best game, but I just feel like that sort of spark that he has given that team, I think that can go a long way. And on the flip side, you look at the Kansas City Chiefs. Boy, you want to talk about, they've quickly developed, I think, a little bit of a problem. I, for the longest time, had said that I don't think the defense was as bad as maybe some of the numbers would suggest, that perhaps it was just one of those things where it's like everyone else in the NFL, kind of. You have to have the best offense, and then if you have a mediocre defense, you'll be okay. And I thought the Chiefs were on that sort of fringe between mediocre defense and poor defense. When you give up as many points as you do to the Oakland Raiders last weekend, and now you couple it with the Kareem Hunt thing, which I'm not even going to bother getting into. You guys all are well aware of how that thing went. There's a part of me now that's wondering, Can a team like Kansas City, at some point, is that defense going to catch up to them? Which I never really thought was truly a problem. But you couple that now when you lose Hunt now, I do wonder a little bit about the Chiefs. I thought they were the best team overall going into last weekend. I thought they were better than the Rams, better than the Saints, better than the Patriots, the Steelers, whomever. Now I don't know that I'm quite so confident. And I do think the Ravens, they're still in that position where they need to win games. And also there's a bizarre scenario, and I know this is still kind of a reach, but with the Steelers losing that game, I don't know how they lost last Sunday night, but with them losing the way that they did, cost me a 3-0 week. The North is not totally lock, stock, barrel done. Because the Steelers now, okay, they're going to go out to Oakland. They'll probably win this weekend. But then they got New England next weekend. It's not inconceivable that if Baltimore continues to win and Pittsburgh stubs their toe again next week, all of a sudden the North might not totally be done. So I don't know if Baltimore can go into Kansas City and win. It's a tough place to play. We're here in December. It's probably going to be cold. I haven't looked at the forecast for that game just yet. I just like what the Ravens are doing, and Lamar has to be better about protecting the football. I think he fumbled 3 times last weekend. He only lost 1 or 2 of them, but got to be a little bit better about that. But it's undeniable what he can do with his legs. I think he's just really exciting. I think he's been a spark for that team. Long story short, give me the Ravens +7 on the road at the Chiefs. The game that I really do like, the game that I love for the weekend. Who knows, maybe I'll be proven wrong. The Atlanta Falcons, team that I picked against last weekend, they go into Green Bay this weekend. Green Bay is home, and they are laying 5 points. Green Bay fired Mike McCarthy immediately after the game last week. A just shocking and disappointing loss at home against the Arizona Cardinals. The Atlanta Falcons lost at home against the Baltimore Ravens and a rookie quarterback. I think the wheels have completely fallen off the Atlanta Falcons. And with the Packers, this is one of those instances where it doesn't matter what the numbers would say and who does what and da-da-da-da-da. This has more to do with, I feel like this is that game. Joe Philbin is going to be the interim coach this week. Not saying much because I remember him from when he was in Miami. But I look at this just feels to me like the prime opportunity for this team now that they've got that cloud. And look, I think Aaron Rodgers has done a lot of complaining this year. But at the end of the day, he's got the juice. He's got the pull. He's the guy. To me, this feels like the game where now that the overlying sort of cloudiness has parted because McCarthy's gone, this could be a game where they blow up after such a terrible game last weekend. And now Atlanta going in there, coming off of a bad home loss themselves. I think Green Bay could win by double digits easy. And maybe I'm crazy. I've already got my bet in. But I like Green Bay quite a bit in here. They're laying 5. I think they could win by 10 to 14. We'll find out. Give me the Packers at home -5. And the last game, like this game, don't love it. I could see it being a little bit uncomfortably close. It's also in that little kind of weird range. The Denver Broncos -4.5 at San Francisco 49ers. I don't think San Francisco's very good. That's not breaking any news. And I do think Denver's quite good. Now, the 4.5, a little bit higher than I'd like. If it would come down a little bit into the 3 range, I don't think it's going to. That'd be a considerable move at this point in the week. But I think Denver's pretty good. I think Phillip Lindsay is very, very talented. He's probably a Pro Bowler. You could make the argument that he's the Rookie of the Year. And again, San Francisco, they don't really have a heck of a lot to play for at this point. 4.5 is in that gray area, but I do think, and Denver's also not without a chance as far as playoff hopes are concerned. They're not going to win the division, but they could certainly get a wild card. So if they continue to keep this thing rolling along, I think Denver's got a good chance. Give me Denver -4.5 on the road at the 49ers. So a recap, 25-14-0 year to date through 12 weeks. Here we are into week 13. Ravens at Chiefs, give me the Ravens +7. Falcons at Packers, give me the Packers -5 for all the cash and prizes. And the Broncos at the 49ers, give me the Denver Broncos -4.5. There you have it. The Week 13 NFL Trifecta on the Matt Bernier Show. If you've been listening live, thank you for doing so. Live.drf.com, livestream.com, Daily Racing Forms Twitter handle, at DRF Inside Post, or the Daily Racing Forms Facebook page. If you've been listening podcasts like most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. If you're over on YouTube, click that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. If you are over on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever you go about your business with the podcast, write us a review, give us a positive rating. Questions, comments, concerns beneath the video player on YouTube or at me on Twitter, at Bernier_Matt. If you like the way that these sort of video previews or the video analysis for one big race of the weekend has been going, let me know. If you don't like it and you'd like me to go back to sort of a more broad overview of things, let me know. But so far, it's been nothing but positive kickback on these things. So until then, we'll just keep going along with it. As we always do, we're going to wrap this up, throw it into the latest edition of Out of the Gate. I'll be back with the recap edition on Tuesday, going over these this Grade 1 race as well as the other Grade 1 from Los Al, and then some other big action from across the country. So enjoy this weekend. Best of luck, however you play, whatever you play, wherever you play. This has been the preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show.